Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Before we get into our kind of pre-market slash 8:30, I'm not trading analysis, um, we'll look at, I just want to direct your attention to the bottom of the stream. There's a risk disclaimer there. Trading futures is risky. Nothing that you watch on the stream should be misconstrued as financial advice. Everything you see here is educational. Also know that the stream is about 10 to 12 seconds behind live. So anything that you see me doing on stream has already happened in the past. So with those things out of the way, the NASDAQ is opening up here just short of 30K. We streamed on Monday, and it was basically an unstoppable rally to the upside. And yesterday came in, and buyers continued their violence to the upside. A pretty incredible move over the last couple days. We opened up the week around 28,500. We are now almost 1,500 points in 2 sessions away from that. There hasn't been a lot of pullbacks during these moves. If we look at yesterday's session, which I'll actually need to compress because it's so tall. Yesterday's session was pretty much just another straight trend day to the upside. When we streamed on Monday, one of the considerations was it was the first of the month. Sometimes during those on days like that, you're getting a lot of funds that are passive buying, and they start on the first of the month, and so sometimes that can contribute. But yesterday was basically just a full-on continuation of that same idea. And I feel like if I look at yesterday and I look at some of the sort of micro pullbacks that we had during that move, like 500 to 430, that's like a 70-point pullback. From the higher in that day, you had 900 to 800, not even quite, not even quite. So really, you went most of yesterday with no more than like a 80 to 100 point pullback in the Nasdaq. So really, just some pretty impressive price movement from the buyers. And moves like this, it's hard to know what all factors are sort of contributing in terms of all of the buying. But I do know that from an order flow perspective, that whenever we have really, really big range with really, really small pullbacks, it just sort of kind of feeds on itself in terms of creating this kind of squeezy type behavior and super fast acceleration, high range over the last couple days. And it just comes from a lot of things. But when you think about how often the market sort of mean reverts during a given session or over a given week, and then people get used to that and they start taking positions sort of based on that type of behavior. And when it doesn't play out the way that it typically does, you get people that are fading it. Maybe they're averaging into a position and they're waiting for some type of pullback that ultimately doesn't come or doesn't get them into the money. And then they ultimately have to cover higher, and the squeeze kind of continues. So as an intraday trader, I don't necessarily care about the mechanics of it, but I always like to kind of create sort of a little like narrative in my head to think about like what's going on behind the scenes. I haven't taken a trade the last 2 days. I was on stream here with you guys on Monday and just couldn't find an entry. And then yesterday was basically more of the same. I kind of watched the opening range get set, and once it took off and just started doing this whole wouldn't give me more than 5 to 10 points to 25 points of a pullback, I just let it go. And so now we're up here trading just above 30K. You obviously have to say that, buyers very much in control right now. And I don't think it's something that I'm very apt to want to step in front of, but I'm also very conscientious that we've done 1,500 to 1,600 points over 2 sessions. So might be starting to get just a little bit overcooked. But, the people who came in trading it and trying to fade it yesterday also probably thought it was overcooked from Monday. So I think it's very much an observation. If I'm going to scalp anything on the short side, it's probably going to be pretty fast. But kind of looking for the first 30 minutes or so. If you haven't watched the stream before, I don't trade the first 30 minutes. I let the opening range get set and allow the market to trade so that I can kind of gauge volatility and see where the market thinks it wants to go, at least for the first period of time. So I'm kind of looking for some type of exhaustive type push behavior. So if we can get a ramp up, just kind of continue this perma bid through the opening range and then get some kind of liquidation that might be tradable for, some profit taking. I'm not looking to like short this back down to, you know, 26, 29,500, like looking for 400 or 500 points or something. I think we're just a little bit overdone in my opinion, and just kind of looking for some people to take profit and for sellers to kind of step in um, and recover some of what they've given up through the week. Um, in terms of long ideas, if we get that pullback, especially if we get this pullback during the opening range, and we're already kind of sitting down, near the overnight lows or things like that, very interested in some type of pullback to get us back up. I think 30K is a sort of like mental number, and I think it will probably be a bit of a magnet, as well as a ceiling, I would think, going into today's session. So if you've traded with ScalperIQ before, you will notice that there are some new looking zones on our chart. These solid lines with a gradient moving are actually different than our delta zones. These are an in development study. You'll see that it says dev right here. So one of the benefits of coming to trade live with us is you get to see some of these new tools tested live, and that's how we test all of our tools. There's a development process and there's some back testing and things like that in terms of exploration. And then at some point, put it on the chart and see how it operates in a live environment before it ever reaches the hands of our users. So today is day one for our excess levels TBD on naming there. But what it's looking for is it's looking for absorption. And so what it does is it looks over a series of candles and needs a certain number of those candles. So very similar to our exhaustion markers that need a sequence of events to fire. These excess levels basically look for a series of bars whose point of control and most of their volume is all concentrated to one side. And then those type of events are sort of ranked across the session to pick out the most extreme versions. So you'll see that they pop up in areas of consolidation. And it basically, the whole range of the colored area is the area that was experiencing the absorption. So places to look for rebids and reoffers, support and resistance. So we'll kind of see how that plays out for today's session. If we look at yesterday, we had some nice spots. This one flagged, and then we couldn't even hardly get back to it. All of this sell off here at the end of the day was AMD and SpaceX earnings. So just the NASDAQ reacting to some of the tech stocks that came out with earnings yesterday. But this is like a nice example of you had absorption from sellers as buyers tried to push here. They got through, retested the same area, and then off to the races. The ones that are slightly lighter colored, so not like quite full red, are from Globex. So we have Globex as well as the RTH levels. So we'll see how those trade live. Back testing, for any of you that have done any type of sort of back testing or, anything like that, you can do as much back testing and historical data looking at and testing that you want, but at a certain point, you got to put it in a live environment and see how it reacts, because the other thing that's really tricky to do is back testing requires that you need to like know exactly what it is that you want to have happen. So like if you wanted to gauge like do these absorption zones hold, what does hold really mean, right? Like it could be does price get in there? Does it hang out for a little bit? And then what, 5 minutes later, 15 minutes later, it's higher than it was? How much heat did you take during that 15 minutes? And so we do a little bit of that testing to kind of see like, does this idea have any edge at all before it becomes, go deeper into experimentation. But it's at the end of the day, um, we're intraday futures traders and we want to see how these levels react live. If you've traded with our impact study, which shows really large imbalances at certain prices, that is uh, a study that we have found to work really well in a live environment. But individual levels are quite hard to back test. So that's why we don't like develop a study and then like throw it directly to our users, who I'm sure would be excited to test and use it. But we like to do at least a few weeks of testing with it live so that we can communicate to you guys what the strengths and the weaknesses are. So buyers up at 30K. Pretty impressive move overall. The most selling I feel like we got was actually at earnings yesterday. Um, I think there was a few names reporting. AMD was one of the kind of headlines there in the market. Even though they beat, the market did not care for their capex spend, which was super, super high. I think close to almost $1 billion of spend, which is, you know, kind of the name of the game right now in the AI race. So while the Nasdaq is continuing to push higher, let's take a look at some of the other indexes. Uh, so ES continues to go higher. It made new all-time highs yesterday. Um, it's up a little over 0.5%. The Dow is up almost 1%. Bitcoin is flat. As I've mentioned before, I don't trade crypto, but I use it as kind of a gauge for risk on or risk off sentiment. Though to be honest with you, I feel like Bitcoin has just been kind of like dead in terms of volume and price movement in the past, I don't know, 4 months, 3 or 4 months. It used to be a pretty good gauge to be able to be like, if it was like pre-open or it's over the weekend, it might react to some of like the Middle East stuff to like kind of sell off in anticipation of equities potentially selling off at the Globex Open, but I just haven't seen that. Um, I just haven't seen that recently. And so I'm going to scroll away so I don't have to watch that ping pong around while I'm talking. But that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. I feel like I saw it down 1 or 2% maybe in the last like week or two, but just generally flat. And I feel like I read somewhere in the last couple days that like crypto volume in general over the last like 4 to 6 months is like reaching like, you know, really like I don't know about historic lows, but it's really, really low volume for crypto right now. So there seems to be not only a lot of lack of price movement, but just kind of a general disinterest, which honestly, with equities at an all-time high, I think that makes sense. Um, you know, if you can make as much money putting your money to work in, less risky type things, um, then I think that's going to be people's inclination. So may not see any interest going back into crypto until equities pull back over all-time highs. And just noticing on the profile, they are doing a little bit of volume here as they push to like 30,000, 60-ish. I feel like I'm just going to say 30, 60-ish because it's just a mouthful to say the other way. But you're getting a pretty like, you notice that the volume is kind of tapering off. So you may be starting to get some late some FOMO buyers, and nobody really coming in size here. Um, and I'm just going to reduce the number of these that I see. I have it had it set really high to look at stuff last night. I'm just going to put this at a max of 2, and I'm going to turn off my ETH zones just to kind of declutter my chart. Same thing for impact. Let me just reduce, just because we're kind of in a more compressed range here. I don't need quite so many levels on my chart. And if you traded with ScalperIQ, you'll know that as I reduce the number of things on my chart, I'm also only showing the stronger ones. So has the benefit of both decluttering the chart and only showing me the quote unquote strongest areas of imbalance. But it's kind of a traffic jam right now, to be honest. Previous day high, session mid, opening range low, all of it's kind of jammed into this range. So this is kind of a no-go for me in terms of trading. And this still doesn't look, like sort of like blow off top style pullback, and the way you lose money trying to fade these uptrends is like not waiting for, like trying to be first, right? There will be some kind of backside move on this rally. But honestly, most of the time, you're better off either just joining the rally if you can find a place to get in, or at least waiting for, a significant sell move. I mean, if we're up 1,500 or 1,600 points, um, you know, 50 points or even 100 points is not a significant sell move. It's a buying opportunity. So just kind of paying attention to what's going on here. Let me continue my look at what else is up. I see that gold futures and silver futures are up. And let's take a look at the stock world. In the S&P, and in terms of its top holdings, Nvidia is up 4%. That's obviously driving a lot of the Nasdaq right now, followed by Disney, and then Meta and Intel. And then everything else below that is pretty flat. On the red side, it's mostly Dow stocks. There's some energy stocks down. Microsoft is down a little bit, and communication stocks are down a little bit. So that's a risk off, that's a risk on type of distribution there, with Nvidia being up and communication stocks being down. Communication stocks tend to be more of a flight to safety. If there are, if there's risk or uncertainty, the market likes to buy things that it feels good about or feels like it won't move around too much on them. So AMD opened up, took an incredible hit for earnings, was trading at 532. I think it was up almost 9% before earnings dropped, and then dropped all the way to 463 on the print, and now trading back up at 500. So the volatility in AI names kind of continues. So I've owned AMD for a long time uh, in my long-term portfolio, and it's I remember it trading at like, in the 80s, and it was like, getting $1 or $2 a day was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that AMD moved around that much, and now you're getting like 40 to 60 to maybe even $80 rotations over a given set of days. Just really incredible how, as prices go up, same kind of thing for Nvidia, things start trading very, very differently. So So you'll see a little bit of this absorption zone that we were talking about here at the high. I'm actually going to flip my colors. I'm just going to keep my absorption zones as red so they stick out for today's session. If you're joining late, those are an under development study here at ScalperIQ. So we're seeing how they play out in a live trading environment. They are different than our delta zones. Our delta zones show sort of one directional extremes. So our delta zones will print when you're getting very, very high aggression from one side or another. So you can see it from the overnight that it got very, very aggressive from the sellers near the overnight low. And then eventually, once that kind of tapers off and cools off, the zone will freeze in place. And so you can read them two ways, if they're appearing and sort of like going from one candle to the next candle to the next candle, then sellers are just kind of continuing to press into that direction, or buyers if it's in the reverse direction. But then also once it freezes, it works a little bit like our exhaustion markers in that once the zone stops moving, the move is kind of cooling off. And so doesn't mean that price is just going to like reverse on a dime right there, but it can give you a hint that at least price is cooling. But they are showing, you'll see they're showing up in different places than where our absorption zones are showing. So pretty narrow opening range on the NASDAQ so far. I mean, we're talking about 150 points. So, and a lot of times these rallies, as much as people, I think another thing that gets people into trouble is while they can just sort of like V, whether we're like selling off or we're in this case going up and you get an upside down V, Vs are just like not as common. I think they're technically, I don't know if I've done any back testing on this, but they seem a lot more common, especially on the sell side, for buyers to sort of rally a V off the lows in recent years, but I haven't done any back testing. That's just my own observation of that. But I think Vs in general are less common. Like if this thing comes in this morning after a 15 to 1800 point rally and then just goes sideways in like a 200 point range, which will probably be difficult to trade and choppy and frustrate a lot of people. But I think that that's something to be aware of, is that the market can just get tired. Just there's no more buyers left, but nobody wants to step in front of it from a short perspective, and we just end up with range compression. So it doesn't mean that like just on the first day that it cools off that it's gonna like roll over and go back to new lows, or do any kind of significant damage. So it takes time for momentum to cool off and then roll back in the other direction, if it's going to at all. We saw that rally earlier in the year, where we came off the lows on a daily time frame and just absolutely ripped face for like 3 weeks. So I don't know that that's what this is going to do, but something to keep in mind is that even if the range has been really high over the last couple days, doesn't mean that we're overcooked yet. And if I'm just going to scalp it intraday, I only need it to be overcooked for a handful of minutes. So testing this absorption zone here. I wouldn't put too much weight in this one. It's sitting right in the middle of um, value and kind of in the middle of this chop area, but we'll see how price reacts here. We have a buy and balance up here at, just going to call it 46. So you can see that flagged right there, this 135 delta print. Just kind of ping-ponging around in a small range here. Opening range has about another 5-ish minutes before it gets set. Did any of you catch any of this rally the last couple days? As I said at the beginning of the stream, I did not catch. I didn't get a single trade over the last couple days. I stayed flat. I looked for entries both days and uh, just took off without me. I'm somebody that really needs um, some level of mean reversion, even during a sort of like given uptrend. And when the uptrend is like, you know, the NASDAQ is up 5 or 6 or 700 points in a day, like I'm looking for more than like a 75 point pullback. And I didn't really get one. And so when it doesn't fit my trading style, I just walk away because otherwise I start forcing trades. But be interested to know if anybody that's watching, throw in the chat if you were able to get any good scalps or maybe take a longer trend trade over the last couple days. If you've been trading for a long time, you know that trend days tend to be actually trickier for intraday traders because we're like exposed we're exposed to so much mean reversion and so much chop that when we finally get a clean directional move, we're like, I should be fading that. So which I think is also what fuels some of those moves. Um, but I just let him I just let him go. You know, there's just so many days in a year to trade, and if it's not going to be my style, then I'm going to be uncomfortable, I'm going to make mistakes, probably lose money. And so I'd rather just sit on my hands. Spent time working on this new study for our absorption. So right up to this buy imbalance here at 44. Also sitting inside of some seller absorption here. I guess technically it would be buyer absorption, but absorption here near the highs. The seller's sitting on the offer. I think the other thing that I was considering over the last couple sessions as well is just headline risk, right? Like uh, a lot of this up move came from last weekend. You know, the United States said that they were going to have a really big operation in the Middle East. That never ultimately came to fruition and backed off. And now it sounds like we're talking about uh, another peace deal. I don't know how many peace deals we've had this year, but a lot of peace deals without a lot of peace. And so the market is, I think, up in anticipation of potentially less conflict and uncertainty over there. That's just the opening range getting set. Um, I actually didn't check to see whether we have a 9 a.m. central data drop. So just when the depth of market thins out that much, makes me think that we just dropped some data somewhere. I think that's I think that's ISM is what that just was. So also the 9 a.m. whether there's news or not, like the 9 a.m. rollover for Central or 10 a.m. Eastern tends to have some volatility. All right, I'm going to scroll my depth of market down to the first place that I'm interested to see what if buyers will defend, which is around this 900, this buy imbalance from the overnight. Not necessarily looking to put on a trade here, but it's kind of my first point of reference to see if anybody steps in as we pull back off the highs here. But since we just had data drop, not even like 2 minutes ago, I'll sit on my hands for a minute. Now just hugging the point of control. I have just like the sneakiest suspicion that it's going to be choppy. It already has been choppy. I wouldn't be surprised for that to continue. I feel like what I would like is, some kind of pullback into the hard part is like this is like the last big area of consolidation for in terms of intraday yesterday. You see some of our absorption flagging down here at like 29,500, but like that's far away from price right now. So I feel like what I would like is to maybe see us sweep, if we can get any momentum to the downside, sweep the overnight low and the Globex open, which are basically the same price right now. That's why that looks so weird and hard to read. I think they're like just within one tick of each other. But a sweep down here, a hold, and then a potential rebid back up into the opening range would be nice. But trading in the middle here, right at the point of control, is going to be a non-starter for any type of trades for me. And if you're coming into a session and you have any kind of like inkling that you think it's going to be choppy and you still are like, I want to put on some type of trade, then your best bet is to stay out of value. So stay out of this blue area, which is typically the center of where most of the volume is done. And it's going to be the typically, not always, but like typically the area that is going to be the least directional. So um, just worth a little cheat code there to not touch things when you're apt to get chopped up in this area, as we've already seen. So trade your edges, see what it does if price gets outside of this area and how much volume it starts to do there. But we're also sort of like near the tail end of summer trading, which it's been really, really choppy. I mean, I found it to be relatively tradable. Last week was pretty challenging with FOMC and earnings. But on an intraday time frame, I feel like this summer hasn't been as bad as past summers. Some of you may disagree with me, which is which is okay. It has been choppy, but I feel like there's been some decent intraday movement to trade off of, because I've definitely traded summers where like the range is super, super low. And that is really hard. It, for me at least, really hard to make money because we don't move around a lot. You have to have pretty good entries. You're typically having to trade a bit more size to be able to get the same type of like, points return. So you're trading with tighter stops. And typically you're having to hold for longer because it just takes longer for price to move around. And I hate that. I want to be in and out of trades fairly quickly. I think my average hold time is below 5 minutes. So, though I did have a nice trade last Friday, which I think I mentioned on stream on Monday. Of course, it was after I got done streaming, which is always the like, I swear I saw Bigfoot, right? I did take screenshots, but um, I was able to catch like a 300 point move on a single M and Q contract, which was a nice way to end a week that kind of beat me up during the middle. I didn't like get demolished during the earnings week, but I just couldn't get on the right side of price and just took a few small losing days and then finally got on the right side of a trade um, on Friday. And just with like as volatility has been so high, and I'm also not a trader that tends to hold for a really long time. Um, the main reason that I held that one for longer was I like got 50 or 60 points in the money off of my entry like almost instantly because the volatility was incredibly high last Friday. And then I just like pulled my stop up and put it in, whatever the swing sort of like last swing low was. And the NASDAQ just happened to trade really cleanly on the way up, which has not been the case. I feel like there's been a lot of like, wick below, come down, take your stop and run away, and was fully anticipating that that was going to be the case. And um, I don't feel that I did anything different than usual other than just like, structure held as I was trailing my stop. I think somebody was saying that the VIX was up yesterday, even though the market was up pretty high across the board. Um, so I'm not an expert in how the VIX trades, but it's a volatility measure, and you can have volatility to the upside. Um, Historically, the VIX has gone down as the market has gone up, but there can be days where that's not the case. Sometimes that's a little bit of a warning sign that a pullback or something like it is coming, but I don't watch the VIX trade. I'll look at it at the end of the day, or if I'm frustrated by how by how slow price moving is, I'll be like, "What is the VIX at?" And I'm like, "Oh, I see. Okay, why? That's why things suck right now." Which I don't know what it's at this morning, but if we're consolidating like this, it's probably down again. Buyers holding over 30K. I mean, it's in the middle of this chop zone, so not really anything to do with it, but I mean, they basically, if we just like go look at a higher time frame, they basically just made a beeline for it, right? This is an hourly chart. So from this low here, which was 28,319, you're talking 1,700 points. 1,700 points, and looks like the biggest pullback you had was maybe here. So like some profit taking over 29K, but looks like about 100 to 120 point pullback is about all we've had. So if we zoom out a little bit, there's this triple top. And this is kind of what started some of this selling was we had this level here at like 30.65. which is what we've pressed up against um, this morning. And when we tried to break it, buyers just ran out of steam here on the 15th. It was actually during the overnight session, and then sold off from there, never reclaimed it, sold off for a few weeks. Now we're back up testing right around that level, which you can see that that was the same level that they got rejected at here this morning. Is it's like, call it, it's not an exact level because they've tested it a few times. The higher side of it is like 100, and lower than that is like right where we got rejected from the two lower spots this morning. So definitely a meaningful place for sellers to try to continue to defend. Um, Also, a very obvious breakout level as well. If buyers have anything left in the tank, momentum over 3,100 is going to start triggering some stops, in my opinion. So I don't know if they have anything else left in the tank, but it's there if they want it. And I'm probably a broken record, but ScalperIQ works really hard behind the scenes. Our Delta Flow study, which is coloring the candles, to sort of like show when there's a trend, um, smooth out some of the noise and volume and price action, so that when you have a trend, you can stay in it for longer, hopefully, or give you some confidence to stay in it for longer. But when Delta Flow starts to show that things are choppy, you're getting a lot of these gray candles. It's ping ponging back and forth between yellow and or whatever colors you have, your sell color and your buy color. It is extra choppy, which is what it is right now. So, and honestly, even though it won't be fun to trade, consolidation like this, if we don't get some kind of liquidation move down, consolidation or even just kind of minor drift up to the right is arguably a continued win for buyers. Just shows that nobody with sell size has any interest in stepping into this just yet, which, you know, are there any sellers left after the last couple days? I mean, we know that's not how that works, but people do, I think, get hesitant about like, I'm not sure that I want to step in front of that again after we just did, 1,600 points in a couple of days. Nvidia continues to be I think, what is like holding the NASDAQ up here. Um, so it's up 4%, and the next mega cap that's up would be Meta, just up about 1%. Everything else is pretty flat or slightly red. So Nvidia still commands a very large amount of market cap. And so I've joked before, but I feel like these type of moves that we've had the last couple days, where the Nasdaq is up 3% or 4%, um, is like when I'll get like a phone call from my mom who will be like, "I heard on NPR today that the Nasdaq was up like 3%." She's like, "You must have made so much money." Like, no, mom, didn't touch it. Didn't even look at it. Turned it off after 9:30 and went and did something else with my life. And look, I know people that thrive during the last couple days, breakout traders and, people that buy during that type of upward momentum, make bank, make absolute bank. But I'm not, it's just not my style. I'm waiting for a pullback and I'm waiting for a pullback and I want a place to manage my risk. And I just don't get it. Or I don't get filled, or I'm bidding too conservatively and don't get filled. That happens a lot too. Um, NQ is going to see how small of a candle it can create while I'm live streaming, working on like a 5 to 8 point 500 volume candle at the moment. Just sitting right on top of this absorption zone. I've also mentioned before that um, I'm trading my real accounts here, trading a funded account here. So you're not going to see me just like jump into trades just because I feel the need to touch this while I'm live streaming. So you guys get a you guys get a look at the same way that I trade when I'm off stream as well. And we got a pretty good chance. We have like 10 more minutes, um, and we haven't broken either side of the opening range yet, which to me just indicates that there's going to be even more chop to come. So testing the previous day's high here, not with any level of volume or volatility at the moment, but yeah, I'm sure the VIX is down this morning with this type of price action. Let's take a look. The VIX is actually up. Interesting. That's why I don't trade the VIX. I just like or trade off of the VIX. Makes little to no sense to me for how it trades. But the VIX is up to almost 3% this morning. I would really prefer them not to do B period inside of A period. So like all of the price action from 9 a.m. Central to 9:30 Central inside of the range from 8:30 to 9 a.m. Um, that is very indicative that it will be choppy. Uh, and we're pretty close. We're like, they're headed towards the opening range low, but like the range overall is just so small, like 150 point range right now. I think it was on Monday or maybe it was yesterday. I was like not going to trade. And so I like popped my head into a couple of other live trading rooms for like some of the really popular rooms just to be like, what's everybody else doing? And it's just everybody was just like so bored. It's just somebody's playing video games. Somebody else is, you know, walking through his weekend with his viewers. And I'm like, I get it. I get it. Is bored. There we go. There's an opening range low break. They're going to come into the level, this buy imbalance that I've been sitting here with my Dom at um, like 28.99. So not quite B period inside of A period. So first kind of reference point here for buyers. And bounced right in front of it. I've been working on a sort of a call it a depth of market replay application that we're gonna debut for some YouTube videos to kind of walk through different ways to sort of like read the depth of market and read price action. Um, and Motive Wave has a really decent uh, market replay feature. It's actually turned, it's like this bar down here, which I'm actually going to turn off now, but just because it's condensing my window. But if you haven't used Motive Wave's replay, it's actually fairly decent. Ironically, I think it's better in Motive Wave 6, which is what I'm in right now. I think it's a bit choppier and not so fluid in Motive Wave 7, which is disappointing. But the one thing that they don't have during replay is you can't see you can do sim trading on the depth of market, but you can't actually see any liquidity or see what any of that was doing during playback. Um, which then basically means that if you want to learn how to trade or read the depth of market, sort of like price action, that uh, you have to do it live. Like that's the only place to practice. So um, we're building one that I can kind of like scroll through, freeze, pause, see what happens here, has a time and sales window so that you can actually see some of these large orders get filled. I've experimented with the idea of keeping a time and sales window open. Um, it's a little chaotic for me. Like if I turn it on right now, like it's not it's not reducing my anxiety if I'm going to be trying to get into position. You can filter things. So right now, like there's no filter on it. So you're seeing a lot of like one lot and two lot trade. Um, but that flashing and like running past and it's just like, I don't need to see that all day long. Um, so but it does have a time and sales window for kind of like training purposes so that like when we replay we can actually see some of these large orders get filled, that create like our impact levels and things like that. So far it's been pretty cool to see, especially because we can have it in real time or I can like slow it all the way down to like 10%, and you can actually see what sort of like price behavior is happening between buyers and sellers. So we're excited to share that with you guys. Still needs some testing and some uh, still a little rough around the edges, but I think shows promise because it's something that like I try to describe to you guys live when I'm trying to get into a position of like, oh, you can see buyers trying to hold here or sellers doing this or whatever, and you know, a lot of times on the NASDAQ in particular, like it's happening so fast that I think for newer traders and anybody that doesn't trade like a price ladder like this can be really disorienting. So we're hoping that we'll be able to put some content out that will be useful for you guys both to look at visually as well as hear some of the ways that I look at trading around specific reference points. So if you are not a part of our Discord, it is free to join, and you'll get notifications whenever we put out something new like that. So sellers got the low, held right in front of this overnight buy imbalance here at 29,900, and then just went straight back up towards 30K. So that's a nice scalp if you were sitting there, you know, with a limit buy or you marketed in here. That's not my style. Like I would need to see it hold for a minute there before I decide whether I'm going to get into position. I'm not going to catch very many of these V's myself, but I saw this imbalance level, or at least reacted to it. So let's see if they come back down again and try and hold it again. I'd really just prefer this to get lower than that. It's just like the risk to reward is like not my favorite. I think the trade here, if they do come down and start trying to hold this imbalance level, is, you know, an entry just below 29K. Right now with the volatility, 15 to 20-ish point stop. Could probably argue a 25-point stop because if you're in around 900, I think the obvious target is 30K back up through this absorption level. That's 100 points, so it's like 4-to-1 risk to reward. So I think that makes sense there. But very aware that we haven't seen a lot of selling, so the first time we do, it might get a little further than I might like otherwise. So back down to this same level again. Currently trying to hold it. I'm gonna go lower for now. That's edge of value right there. Seller is gonna try to do something here. So we're about 30 points from the level that I was looking at here. Let's see if they can rebid it. I want to see if they can get, I'm just going to reject it there. I'm trying to see if they'll rebid. That would have been a really nice short entry, but I'm not looking to get short. If they go lower, I would look towards the bottom edge of this delta zone. But like the two trade ideas that I'm looking at right now are see if they can hold the bottom edge of this zone around 820 if they're going to continue to pull back. And if not, then I'm looking for them to get back above 900. I'd probably want to see like 920-ish and then come back and hold 900. And that would be my entry there. I'd probably be putting a stop in at, oh look, one of our new absorption zones, flagging that consolidation there at the bottom. I don't love the I don't love the color theme that I have going on right now with the green and the yellow, but I do like how these render live. I think this like slow gradient fade is pretty to look at. So absorption and a little bit of negative delta on that try attempt to push lower, which is what the little blue circle is there. Might take a look at this little spot here. See if we get some kind of pullback. This low here is 52. Oh, just gonna go right back to my level, huh? It's a nice push off of that absorption there. So I haven't watched, you guys are like watching me trade. This is the very first day that this has been on a live chart for this, what's the excess levels that says development study there. So I haven't watched it trade enough to be able to like pop into a trade just because that flagged there. But so because this area was like the area that I wanted to kind of see hold the first time down, and they lost it, rejected it, made new lows. I want to see buyers get above this level, call it like 915 to 920 ish, and then see if I can buy it on a pullback. So it didn't quite get there. Got there like 909. Could have taken a couple of short scalps off of this level, but I just, after the last couple days, I'm not interested in shorting this. I think it's easier to wait for sellers to be done and buy it on the way back up. But that's also why I'm not just like marketing myself in as we get back up to this level. Like I need to see buyers get back above it and come back and hold it then I can look for an entry. And buyers still having a hard time holding it above that level. Like what I'm looking for is like a poke above, and then when they come down, just like struggle to get it back through 900. And right now they're not struggling to get it back to 900, back through 900. And back down to this absorption level. But I mean, this combination of signals down here, a little negative delta push, which is what Phantom is flagging here, or sorry, positive delta on new lows, um, is what's happening. So just a little bit of divergence happening there, which is what that's flagging, mixed with the absorption zone. You know, it's good for almost 50 points. Man, just getting smacked off that 900 level. And this is why, at least for how I like to trade, I always try to at least talk about, it doesn't have to be this like complicated thesis, but like, you know, um, just a sequence of events that I need to or want to see happen because things can happen so fast. And I find that if you're just sort of like watching the depth of market bounce around, and you're like, I want to get long back above 900, be like, well, add a little detail to that, right? Like I said, I wanted to see, 915 to 920 and then come back and hold. We got to 914, so probably close enough. But then just every time we came back down, we just sort of knifed through the level that I was looking at. Um, so adding a bit more detail to your sequencing in terms of how you get in and out of trades has been really helpful for me. So something to consider as they try to rebid this absorption level here. I'm almost like, do I want to take this for research purposes? There's more absorption there, the lows. See if they can hold 60-ish. Nope. All right, the other spot that we talked about looking at for a pullback was into the edge of this delta zone, just like 825. But you kind of got to let sellers do their thing. Wow. Some very, very, very aggressive buying right there. I'm gonna let this settle in a little bit. I'm gonna take a stab at this. Long at 34. Stop is 14, 20-point stop. They're just holding that above this like 35, and they're kind of trying to hold it in this delta zone. So I want to see if we're going to hold here. Target is 900. It's a nice push already. See if they can get back above some of this absorption here. Right back to my entry. offer is going to be just short of 900. Like back at this balance level that they couldn't get through. So offer is sitting there at 97. We get above, if we get above 80, I'm going to move my stop to break even. It'll be almost 50 points. Trying to hold above this absorption zone and get a quick pop here would be nice. Just going to rotate around my position for right now. So getting some buying off this level, but not getting quite the fastest reaction. I've seen a couple of small pops for, I don't know, I think I've been like 20 to 30-ish points in the money, but not much further past that. See some liquidity just popped up here at 900. It's probably helpful for us. Liquidity, larger liquidity tends to be a bit of a magnet from further away from price. All right, if we get above 85 here, I think we just did. All right, just gonna move my stop. Stop is just gonna go to like 28. Just call it, yeah, just below. So only risking 6 points now. So at this point, it can kind of do whatever it wants. Offer is at 97. So at this point, kind of using this absorption zone around 50 as defense for my stop. Um, I don't want to put it quite to break even because there was some buying in the 30s. And so I'm just trying to, if it pulls back, see if that continues to hold. Kind of struggling here in the low 80s. Some sellers stepping in there. See if that big liquidity is still sitting there at 900. They pulled, it's flirting around 900. I think they broke it apart from like 900 to 97, 98-ish. And we're filled right there, canceling my stop. Pretty nice trade there. Zone held really cleanly. Um, and our newfound absorption zone provided um, little extra defense there for us. This may go higher, but I'm happy with a 60 point scalp. I don't think we took more than like 5 or 10 points of heat there. So that's the first trade that I've taken this week, actually. Just could not find entries the last couple days. And they still reoffered 900. That's why my offer was a little lower than 900. I didn't want to get cute with uh, the sellers that are trying to hold something, you know, take back whatever they have left over the last couple days. So I probably won't take the other take a rebid of this area, though I think it's a decent place to look at if it pulls back here. So if you're just joining us, the zones that you see, we have this solid zone here at the bottom, which is our delta zone that comes with our delta flow study, which shows delta extremes. So this would be like a delta extreme from the seller's sell color. And then these zones that are the red one and then the green one, or sorry, I pointed to the wrong one, the green one here and then the red one. Those are a study that is in development right now. I have it up here for ScalperIQ excess levels with dev at the end so that I know that I'm trading with a test study. Um, and what it's looking for is it's looking for absorption. So it's looking for a sequence of candles over I think it's a 5 or 6 bar look back range, whose all of the point of controls, like all of the volume for those, is being done at the lower part of the candle. So it would be like a P-shaped profile, but for an upper one, and then I guess it's a lower D-shaped profile for lower one. So basically just tons of volume going into the bottom side of that area. And we still are using our ranking system for looking to make sure that the area that we're looking at is not just like quote regular absorption, but that it is at some level of extreme for the session. So this is the first time that we're trading with them live. So that's what we do with all of our studies is development and then trade with it live. to see how these levels respond and react. And we do that for 3 to 4 weeks. There's also back testing that happens before this even gets put on a chart as well. Granted, tricky to do back testing for intraday uh, stuff, because we're looking at it from a scalping perspective, and it can be hard to sort of put like programmatic, like I want this level to hold, and then I want to be able to get 10 points off of it before we get 5 points off of it. At that point, you're kind of building a trading bot. And there was a study done, I think a few years ago, maybe it was a little bit longer, that like they looked at quote unquote order flow signals or order flow type signals, um, and whether there was any like edge to trade with them, like to build a a trading bot or something like that off of order flow. And you're seeing a liquidation there. So really nice reoffer. It was actually a better reoffer trade here than it was for my long scalp, but only need to be right for a few minutes. But anyway, the study basically showed that order flow does have an edge if you're talking about book depth or delta or things like that. But that the edge is actually almost completely arbitraged out by 1 second later. So those edges do exist, but like if you're to just take some kind of like rule set about the absorption zones or the impact levels or whatever, and then you like looked at that and back tested it over like years of futures trading data, it's probably going to be a coin flip, right? And so when we build our indicators, we're building some that are showing extremes. They're showing things that typically you would have to watch the depth of market or, read all of the delta here on the side. And we're putting them on the chart in a visual way. So our absorption levels that were in development right now are basically going through that process. And this morning is the first time to have this one on the chart and see how it reacts. So far, looking pretty good. You had some buyer absorption up here, which is flagged with the red zone. So sellers were sitting there on the offer, sort of passively absorbing whatever buyers were throwing at it. Ultimately couldn't get through, sold off. And now you have one here at the low, which is a little less clean. We held the delta extreme here at the bottom, but then it kind of provided support as we got like a quick little rebid and back up over 900. So getting another imbalance down here. So a couple of them actually. You'll see there's one here at 801, and then there's one here at 795 and a quarter. There was a part of me that really wanted to sort of pull my stop up and see if we would get back up into like near the point of control. I'm really glad that I decided not to do that. Yeah, and mostly I took that off because we had already, it was actually the level that we looked at potentially buying, or I was looking at buying on the way down. So we held in front of it, lost it, and then it became pretty clear as we were watching it that sellers were willing to defend right at 900. So it poked through a couple times and then sold off from it. So I was fine with putting an offer out in front of it to see if that was going to happen again. And if it had just like ripped through and gone straight to 950, well, that's just part of it. We were risking about 20 points and made 60, so 3 to 1. I would have liked to see just a little bit more, but down in that delta zone, they just couldn't get it below 30 with any type of volume, and we'd already seen some absorption happening. So that was my thesis for a very quick 60-point scalp. And for me, like, I know this is not revolutionary, but like for risk to reward, like I tend to take multiple tries because I'm running a pretty tight stop, like 15 to 20 points on the NASDAQ, depending on what volatility is like. Um, and so if I know that like it might take me one or two or maybe even three tries to like get into a trade before not getting stopped out, then I want my risk to reward to be, 3 to 1, 4 to 1, something in that realm, because like if my reward is only like one or maybe two, like I might just be breaking even if I get stopped out a couple of times with that. So um, it's totally fine, and I think actually really important, particularly on the Nasdaq and the way the Nasdaq trades, to um, to make sure that your risk to reward, like wherever you think this might go, right? Like if this impact level here had like right here, this one at 900 where we sold, if that had been sitting here at like 972 or 970, whatever, like I probably wouldn't have been as interested in buying it, because the risk to reward there would have been like, I would have had to risk like 20 points to make 30. And so it's like, it works if my entry is perfect and I get that pop right away, but I'm concerned that there's going to be resistance shortly after I buy. So um, that's how I think about things. Like I want to give myself more opportunities to buy or sell the same level, knowing that it might take me a couple of tries, and know that if I do get my target hit, I'm probably still going to make money, and at worst case, going to break even. Um, so some days obviously it doesn't work out that way, and I've been on stream, I think last week during earnings week, take 3 stops in a row. That's usually my cutoff, is like 3 stops in a row. And I'm like, okay, we're just not seeing things. I'm going to take a small red day. But if I'm risking 20 to 30 points, per 30 points is a pretty wide stop for me. We have to be pretty volatile for that. But if I'm risking 15 to 20 points, like, having a red day be 60 to 70 points after fees is, very manageable. I can make that back in one trade fairly easily. So, and I'm trading a 25K funded account. So it's a tight stop on that, $1,000 of drawdown trading account from Lucid. Um, so you can't have, on accounts of that size, you just cannot have big red days. You just can't do it. A $300 or $400 losing day on a 25K account, and you're halfway through your drawdown. So um, big wins, small losses. It's the name of the game. They're trying to rebid 50 here, get back through this absorption level. This is a nice little, like, if you were really looking for a trade entry here, which I wasn't, but this flag here at 801, and then they popped it. So like you got 801, so like so you got like 30-ish points that it popped off of that, and then rolled back over and gave you a couple looks at 800. It's a nice trade. You kind of have to be looking for it, but there's a decent chance that this like rallies up and just breaks through 900 this time. Sometimes I was like the first part of the first dip buy, and so far this second dip buy has looked got a lot more points out of it, but can't get mad about making money. See if they can hold this absorption level here on the way back down. They've actually moved the point of control just now, I think in the last couple minutes, down here to like 850. So that makes, like, I was interested in taking this trade because we were out of value at that point, and traded it back up into value. I'm not so excited. I wouldn't be so excited about taking this at 850 now that that's kind of the point of control, and we've kind of filled out some of this volume here at the bottom. But I do think that like buyers are like still firm, like we're selling. It's probably just, I would assume probably just profit taking. You're not seeing like, violent sell off here. So I think it probably drifts back up. If I was going to trade it again, I'd probably want to see it get back above, kind of like the same trade that I talked about as potentially taking a long here, where I was like, oh, I want to see it go to like 925 and then come back and try and hold this level. And it just never got that high, so we didn't get long. But if it does it again with a little bit more momentum, that might be a nice trade. At that point, I think if you're long around 900, um, I think you're looking for a move back up to 30K. But closing in on the end of the stream here, we usually stream till about 10 a.m. for right now. If you guys want to see us stream for longer, we're open to that. We've just been live streaming for about a month and a half or so now, so still kind of exploring what people like and when people are available and all of that kind of stuff, as well as balancing all of our own internal responsibilities. So try not to trade through lunch. Uh, so we're not quite at New York lunch unless they're taking it really early. But as you start to get into like 11:30 and noon Eastern, like things tend to be choppy and slow. So it's like trading back down to where we were actually long from. We're long at 34. It's trading right around there. Trying to hold this delta zone after they reclaimed it way back down. Just want to look at what price is doing. One thing that Motive Wave doesn't do, and really kind of drives me crazy, is I really wish that I could put study reference markers on the chart. Like I wish I could take like whatever the absorption levels or an impact level and like actually have a column for those, but unfortunately they don't expose any of those, like from a code perspective. They don't allow you to do anything custom in their depth of market. So um, something I'm toying with but haven't really figured out is, can I build a can I build like a separate sort of depth of market um, that would like sit off to the side, that would be like own standalone away from Motive Wave, that would flag and be able to do like custom things like that. It's like a possibility. I probably wouldn't route orders through it. Like I Because then it would have to be like, that would be a annoying round trip of basically like taking data from Motive Wave into the custom DOM, place orders on the custom DOM, and then feed those back in. I don't want that. Just that sounds like a good way to lose money. So I'm not going to do that, but I kind of wonder about like having like a second sort of like reference DOM up that shows maybe more Scalper IQ and or custom things. Like one of the things that I've built into the DOM player that I mentioned earlier is I can basically take, and I can't do it here, but like using my cursor here at 38, I'd be like click and drag, and I can just like very quickly like highlight a set of rows. So like if I start to see, like, let's scroll back up here. So when we saw 900 starting to hold around this impact level here, I might take and say, okay, impact level is sitting right around 900. I could take and just sort of draw and highlight rows from like say 905 to 895. And just like visually, I could then see what is price doing when it gets into my sort of like highlighted area. I can still do it mentally by looking at Motive Wave's depth of market, but it's actually been a really nice sort of like side feature. And the only reason that I coded that into our DOM player is just to be able to, highlight to viewers like, hey, I'm looking at this area, and I understand that it can be kind of annoying if I'm like, hey, I'm looking from like 900 to 875, and you're just looking at a bunch of gray numbers on my screen. So the highlight is really nice. And I've actually found myself as I'm sort of like playing with the DOM, our DOM player, which is like I can it can take orders and trades and everything. It's all simulated on like historical data, but allowing, me to share where there's like what my thought process behind an entry would be. And we can like either like cut off future data. So like you could either see candlesticks like into the future, since the session is already like historical and we're replaying it, or I can put it into like, I don't know, simulated test mode or whatever you want to call it, where like you're just trading like a live, it'd be like trading like this, where you can't see future candles. So kind of an interesting way to do that. And I've like, it seems like it's somewhat, like it's kind of helpful to be able to like, peek ahead to be like, is my entry going to work, or should I have taken it lower, or was I not patient enough? So, but yeah, I'm not sure about a custom depth of market. NinjaTrader allows for building your own add-ons for depth of market. Like you can build your own price ladder and stuff, but they don't really give you a lot of guides on how to do that. And it's one thing to sort of like have visuals up where we're like, you know, looking at the different like scalper IQ studies, but like none of our studies are executing for you. Like they don't have to handle order entry, order routing, any of that kind of stuff. Um, Nice little push off of this absorption level once they got it back above. But yeah, coding for order routing is a whole other level of thing, and probably not something we would ever like give or expose to our users. It's just a lot more risk involved with making sure that orders are getting routed and things like that. So, um, but I think still having like I'm just very interested in the idea of a custom DOM and just really annoyed at Motive Wave for not providing the ability to do that. I also read that on their forum, this is like super nerdy because running development here at ScalperIQ, but I poke around in the Motive Wave forums from time to time, and like to be totally honest, like the mods there are like not abundantly helpful. Uh, People will ask very like specific sort of like coding questions or like, hey, I found a bug, and either get like no response or get like a very generic response. So, and I also saw that they used to package up their software development kit with like, here's how you get started, here's the reference material, blah, blah, blah. And then they also like gave you like a bunch of studies that were like already coded for Motive Wave. So you could have like a reference to be like, this works or this doesn't work, etc. And I was reading some users said that they took a bunch of those down. So there's only like a handful of reference studies. I actually have the older ones archived for our own internal reference purposes, but I just really dislike that. Like if you're gonna like make a software development kit for a platform, just make the software development kit for the platform. Like make it easy so that people can actually, use the thing. It also will reduce your own support questions because otherwise you're getting questions from people like me that are like, hey, this appears broken. Why is this not working? And then it's just sort of radio silence. So Ninja is more flexible in that way. Um, but I actually don't have I have a couple of Ninja Lucid evals, but I don't have any rhythmic feeds. And I'm so used to trading on a full rhythmic feed that I would probably need to sort that out first. I don't think Lucid offers a rhythmic feed for NinjaTrader. I think maybe Apex does. I'd have to look. And I think even then that I don't think that it's MBO data. It's like market by order data, which I can actually show real quick what that looks like. It's a little hard to see on NQ. If I go in here, and I believe it's in volume. Yeah, so it's in here underneath bid ask. So you can do show market by order. And might have to do it this way. See if that actually even works. Sometimes the liquidity is so like, so what market by order does, trying to find a block here that's not like a couple of contracts. So like you can see this one just barely, that this one's kind of red right here at 86. So what market by order does is if we just look at this 13 level without market by order highlighted, it's basically like you don't know whether that's 13 one lot orders or whether it's like one participant trying to buy 13 contracts, right? So market by order actually has the order ID built into it. It's not anything you have to do. You just have to turn on the setting in whatever software you are, and you have to be on a rhythmic feed to be able to get that. But then you can actually see whether it's like one large participant or whether it's not. Whether that has edge long term, I'm not really so certain about that. And for me, it just ends up being a lot more noise. But that's a way to do that. So if anybody has a rhythmic feed for NinjaTrader, throw it in the chat. I have not sorted that out or done a ton of research yet. I just know that the Lucid ones that I have, I think, are CQG feeds. And so the depth is, I think the depth is only best bid and best offer from what I've seen from my Lucid feed over there. Sometimes, like I think Ninja's regular data feed, like if you get data through Ninja, like I think whatever their, can't remember the name of theirs. But that feed has like, I think 10 points above and 10 points below, maybe something like that. So it's still not full book. And I've just traded with Rhythmic. I have a Rhythmic personal account as well, and most of the prop firms, um, trade Rhythmic. So I'm just so familiar with being able to see a full price ladder and not get condensed down to being able to only see best bid or best offer. I'm honestly kind of surprised this hasn't gravitated back up towards 30K just yet. Sellers actually keeping this pinned below 29,900 and below the opening range low. There's a big seller there. I don't know that they actually, that's one of the benefits of having time and sales up, which I don't right now, is that you can actually see whether that order executed or not. Because a lot of times they'll flash, especially for that level of size, they'll like flash it on and then turn it off, and hard to know whether that executed. The impact studies can help you with that, because if it's like a really, really big order and taken all at one level, it'll flag it if it's an extreme. So right back down to this imbalance here at 801. Seller's coming down with a little bit of heat though. I'm just gonna watch this level trade for a few minutes. I'm probably one and done, but I have an imbalance here sitting right near the low of day, so risk to reward might be decent here. It's also out of value. You've got a little bit of, they built like this kind of little like miniature high volume node right here during this consolidation. So you can actually see that on the depth of market here. So like this is like, if you squint your eyes, this is kind of like the same shape over here on the delta volume column as you're seeing here on the actual profile. Let's just glance at a higher time frame as we're pulling back. So like once again, on an hourly chart, you just don't have very many points of reference. You know, my assumption would be is that if we pull back, that looking at like 29,400, like these tops here, you know, and fill out some of these single prints from this rally up makes a lot of sense. But, that's 400 points from where price is right now. So I don't know if sellers have that kind of momentum in the tank today, but that's the tricky part about these sort of, very high velocity, big range moves up without a lot of like look back, is it's like you have to just wait, in my opinion. You have to wait for this to like try to put in some kind of like higher low and then trade around that higher low, because if you're just like getting long somewhere in the midst of this like vertical up move, you kind of just don't know where it's going to try to hold. So they bounced that once and then just completely flushed it. Now you've got a delta zone there at the bottom. I had somebody ping me like 3 or 4 months ago. And they were like, how did the delta zones always end up being at like the low of day or the high of day? Which they don't always, but a lot of times you'll see them near highs or lows, which makes a lot of sense because that's like, they flag extremes, and near the edges of price movement is where you're going to find extremes. And so, but they do progressively move down, right? So like if this had been created here and they kept selling and they were selling even harder than they were selling to create this zone, like the zone will kind of like move down with them, and then it pauses wherever that aggression ends. And so, that's why we say our studies are not signals by themselves. If you just like buy the first time you see a delta zone near the bottom of a range, you're probably going to be in for a bad time. So, like in this case, it would have worked, right? But I just encourage people to do your own level of analysis and um, don't just like buy or sell. I think I'd actually turned off my pivots and my exhaustion markers last night when I was getting, which we don't actually even have any flagged in view right now, but I had turned them off while I was getting this new study onto the chart. That was a really fast rebid of 800. Let's see if they come back down and hold that area. You actually could have got some okay short scalps this morning. You know, you guys don't have this on your chart, but this absorption level near 30K, which like the nice thing about this particular move would have been that it lined up with a higher time frame, some tops from back in July. And then this hold of, 900 multiple times. So we were long, so I was taking profit here, but it's actually a decent short trade there. They're back above where I was long before at 34, but pretty choppy, but some okay rotations in here. This gets a little muddy. Interesting that the bottom of this absorption zone lines up almost with the bottom of the point of control here. Which they're going to go try to test the underside of here. So like if I was like looking to trade this impact level here at 801, like this buy imbalance here that you can see flagged, we saw it bounce the first time. So that's the like, okay, I noticed that something's happening there. And then they flushed it. So like when price comes back through, I would have wanted to see them like hold, 800. And they honestly didn't even bounce it that much the first time, right? Like 20 points. After this move down, I probably would have wanted to see like 840 or something and then come back and test it. Regardless, they flushed it. And then in looking for a rebid, like I'm just not ever going to be a part of this trade because they just absolutely ripped it right back through that price. Now that they've gotten 40 to 50 points off of that level, if they come back and are able to hold 800 again, that's more of my type of trade idea. You have buyers willing to push this at least 50 points from price. So it's not just about like getting a good entry. It's also about like knowing what, like if you're going to be long, you want to know that buyers are willing to put on risk higher than your entry. If you're only getting like 10 points above where you want to get, they've only shown that they're going to get 10 points above where you get in, it's not ideal. So I'm not going to take this trade, but I want to see how this reacts to the bottom of this extreme and the basically point of control. And there's a little tiny, very, very small low volume node right there at 50. So they just rejected in front of it right there. This is just kind of research for me as I'm trading live to see how the market reacts to these areas that the absorption is flagging. So I'll be here for about another like 5-ish minutes or anything like that. If you're watching the stream and you like what you see, then give us a thumbs up. We're working to build not only the ScalperIQ community but also the YouTube live community. I'm always very interested to hear how other people are using our studies. So I think there's a lot to be learned from user feedback, and honestly, you guys have let me know and been like, I trade them like this, and I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing. That's great. I'm happy that it works for you. So but we're gonna do Monday, Wednesday, Friday for a little while. Um, we do like the liney boys. I try to come up with come up with cool or interesting names for our indicators, but uh, not gonna stop the Discord community from naming them themselves. So I believe that the going names are Liney Boys for our impact studies, and then I believe that Phantom, which is such a cool name, and you guys are gonna be like, those are beach balls, and I'm like, great, solid. Let's just go ahead and rename everything everywhere. Speaking of Liney Boys, uh, you have somebody else that is watching that level there for 805, the big buyer. I want to see if I don't know if I'm going to get there before they fill it, but let's see if I turn MBO back on. So this is a time where MBO can actually be helpful. You'll see that this is flagged super deep, and it's kind of hard to see probably, but this is like purple. So like 100 lots of this are one buyer or one order ID. So, once again, I haven't back tested anything off of that. I don't know if that actually provides edge long term, but one participant buying 100 contracts to me is very different than, 50 people buying 2 contracts. Like this is not a retail order, right? No retail person, because we're cross trading. So like when I place trades, it cross trades over to MNQ. You can do that in Motive Wave by right clicking and going to cross trade. So I can actually watch and look at the delta on the main contract, but trade the micro, because the order flow will be different for both, right? But like no retail person is trading 100 in Q all at once. So that's somebody with a lot more firepower. So that's a place that MBO can be helpful. It's just a little hard to see. And I actually don't know if I poke around in here. Sometimes they have a filter, but not. Yeah. So like when I built our DOM replay that I've been talking about, um, we actually have it done so that there's little, you see that order get filled right there. Uh, we have it so that it's like little blocks to be able to see, bigger block for 100 single order ID or smaller. Um, but Motive Wave doesn't look like it exposes that quite as much. We actually have like a number in ours, so it'll be like, 100 inside of a large block so you can see the overall size per order. But it's like Motive Wave doesn't allow for that. Also, it's tricky on the NASDAQ. It'd probably be easier to see on ES because it'd be thicker. Trying to hold this 800 level. Yeah, it's too late in the there's some buying. Too late in the morning for me to be taking this, but I think that that's a pretty good level right there. That is some aggressive execution though. Oh, I didn't realize that I kept the MBO on. You'll see the probably so hard to see on stream, but like there's a 30 lot order here, or maybe like 28 lot single buyer at 800. All right, guys, I think I'm going to wrap it up here. Just zoom out a little bit to see what this session looked like overall. Mostly just, you know, this looks mostly like profit taking to me. We're not seeing aggressive selling. You're seeing, rotation down, rotation back up, rotation down, rotation back up, but it's all pretty controlled and not that big of a range on the NASDAQ right now. I think we're at like just at 300 points if you go all the way to the opening range high from the low. So tradable, a little slow. I have a feeling that this is gonna drift back. That was a nice entry there off of this after we watched that 100 contract buyer get filled, getting a nice push off that level. So the Liney boys continue to provide great risk to reward. So like I said, if you like the stream, give us a like. We'll be back again on Friday morning. Our Discord is free to join. There's a link in the description. Feel free to come and join us. If you like the studies that you see or you are curious about some of our order flow studies, we offer 14-day free trials. So you get the full experience for 2 weeks to be able to decide how you like it. And if you're curious, no risk. You can sign up and give it a look. We'll be back again on Friday. Cheers, guys.